Our next speaker, before we go towards our panel discussion, is of course Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Rakib is an independent academic and culture writer specialising in matters of social cohesion, democratic governance and public security. Rakib holds a BA in Politics and International Relations, first class honours, an MSc in Democracy, Politics and Governance, passed with distinction, and a PhD in Political Science, all obtained from Royal Holloway, University of London. So a really first class academic. On behalf of think tank Res Publica and the For Fans 2 campaign, Rakib authored the report Playing by the Rules, the Governance of English Football. The report makes a case for an independent regulator for English football, which prioritises financial sustainability and social responsibility, as well as ensuring that supporters have a greater say in the game, especially over matters of club identity and heritage. And heritage is one of the key issues, because if a club goes under, more than 100 years of heritage can be lost. The lifeblood of a community can indeed cease overnight if a licence is lost, or of course a club is of course no longer functioning. So our next speaker, Dr. Ehsan Rakib.
Well, firstly, Robert, thank you for that very generous introduction, and thank you for organising this webinar. By the way, it's very much a hot topic in our politics, and I just thought I'll touch on some of the points that have been made by Aryaman and Bob. There's no doubt for me that one of the main points that I'll make in my report is that the current system of self-governance in English football is not fit for purpose. I think that when you look at, for example, existing owners and directors tests, Aryaman touched on that, they're just simply not stringent enough at all. Whether or not he'd be allowed to own a football club is a different matter, but for me, it definitely not robust enough for my liking. But then Bob makes a very important point, the lack of retrospection, which is contained in the white paper. So I think that that's an element of this proposed legislation that the government really has to build upon. How does it approach incumbent club owners who are clearly running their clubs in an unsustainable manner? There's a great deal of emphasis on how it handles that process when it comes to prospective owners. But if there's an existing owner director in place who are perhaps not acting in the interests of financial sustainability or indeed social responsibility, they really need to flesh out how they're going to manage those kind of situations. So I completely agree with Bob on that front. I think that, you know, many of the technical aspects were covered by Bob exceptionally well, and Aryaman as well. I think what I'd like to talk about more is my personal experience of my local hometown club, which is Luton Town Football Club, the Hatters, which is the oldest professional club in Southern England, by the way. And I think in a sense, Luton has gone through a very tumultuous period, but now it's established itself as a quite secure, community-oriented championship outfit now. Crucially, one place above Watford as well, which is just as important as being in the playoff places. But I think what I'd really talk about is the fact that football, in a sense, because I've seen some very questionable commentary since the white paper came out. I've seen some writers compare football clubs to water suppliers and energy providers. I'm not sure if they're looking forward to Thames Water versus Npower in the weekend, but those kind of comparisons I'm not too sure about. But for me, football clubs across the country, especially in smaller sized provincial towns, post-industrial communities, as you say, they're the lifeblood of those communities, families and communities supporting their local football club, which provides a deep sense of meaning and purpose across the generations. And I think that's where I personally feel that the existing system of self-regulation, the argument that the free market will account for the more social elements of what we're discussing, I do question that. And I think that was very interesting that in the white paper, now you have a Conservative government openly saying the free market is simply not going to deliver when it comes to understanding the social value and the civic meaning of local football clubs. And as we've already talked about the experience of Bury FC being expelled from the English Football League back in 2019, the winding up of Macclesfield Town by the High Court the following year. These kind of episodes, they can cause a great deal of trauma in those kind of communities. And I think it's really important to make that point. I think that when you're looking at football clubs, I describe them as potential anchor institutions. The government talks a great deal about levelling up. I think a lot of people don't have a clue what levelling up really means, or what, what's the substance behind it. And I think that was a missed point actually in the white paper. It didn't even talk much about levelling up and the potential role that football clubs can play, especially if the government better coordinates with football charities and foundations, how that can actually help to lift educational standards, boost employment prospects, heighten health-related awareness. And indeed, in Luton, for example, my local club is involved in, trying to get young people away from gang-related activity. So it's a sort of anti-crime prevention measures. And I think that that's where there is real value in that sense, in an independent regulator which promotes a culture of financial sustainability, social responsibility, and the protection of cultural heritage. I think that's where I do see the value of having an independent regulator for English football. But naturally, it needs to be very well designed. It needs to be very carefully crafted. And I think that my two fellow panelists have made those points exceptionally well. I was actually a bit alarmed by the length of the white paper, actually. I found it to be quite a short document. I think in those critical areas, it doesn't go in depth. It doesn't go into the nitty gritty of it. And in some cases as well, I actually find that certain things that are left out of the regulator's immediate remit are a crying shame. Now, a lot of conservatives are very critical about modern day equality, diversity and inclusion. But I do feel, for example, when you're talking about significant barriers of participation, Robert, I still don't think we have the most disability-friendly game in the country. And I think that's something that should have been talked about. And that's something that should actually fall under the independent regulator's remit. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. There should have been more about how do we encourage clubs to think carefully about match day experiences in order for them to be more accessible for working class fans who are really feeling the pinch in the middle of a cost of living crisis. And actually, that would have helped the Conservative government to really reconnect with working class Brexit land. You're talking about Brexit Britain not being in favour of the European Super League. They weren't very much in favour of the Liz Truss experiment either, which lasted 45 days. So actually, the white paper would have really presents a golden opportunity for the Conservative government to almost cultivate this wholesome, uplifting conservatism, talk about sustainability, responsibility, duty, protection. And I just feel that those themes were very poorly presented, actually, in the white paper. So I'm gonna rattle on too much, but I think my general view is I do think we have to move towards the creation of an independent regulator for English football because of those very problems that we see when it comes to that fragmented and, quite frankly, dysfunctional system of self-regulation that we currently have in place, which have let down many working class communities across the country. But the government also has to think very carefully and not be too proud of this white paper. There's still a great deal of work to be done.